Mr. Koch-Weser, before the Copenhagen climate change meeting, you said business needed transparency, longevity and certainty out of a UN deal. Do you think you got that, and what's the way forward from now?
I think Copenhagen left us with a glass half full. And to provide leadership and momentum now, I believe we need three key strategic prongs of action. One is building on the lessons of Copenhagen and make progress through the UN process itself, but this will be very difficult this year. This would entail to learn some of the lessons, to merge some of these separate tracks of negotiations, for the Mexicans to set very clear milestones for success. The other one under this first prong would be to reform now the CDM mechanism, the Clean Development Mechanism, scale it up, professionalize it, give it the right resources. Much larger volumes will in the future have to be transacted through that mechanism. There has to be a more professional outfit. And the third is in our high-level advisory group, the UN Secretary General, that was just appointed, of which I'm a member. We should think now about how the 100 billion that were mentioned in finance for developing countries can be mobilized. Now the second prong is perhaps even more important at this juncture, and that's what I like to call smaller coalitions of like-minded countries. Can be cities, can be states within countries that take certain sectors or sets of issues and move forward with serious money, serious performance, serious transparency in reporting on results. RED, the reduction of emissions from deforestation and degradation, is an excellent example. You had a number of countries, Norway prominently, UK, others now, Guyana, Brazil, Indonesia. They have 3.5 billion public funding on the table. Let's operationalize that. That's such a smaller coalition of like-minded. The other examples, like for example feed-in tariff regimes for renewables in developing countries, that could go on. The third prong, and that comes directly to your question, I think we in the private sector have to form coalitions where we move bottom-up with iconic mega projects, then go to regulators and say, we need this and that in an enabling environment, and please help us move forward. One excellent example for that is, I think, and Deutsche Bank is involved, is the Desertec project to bring large amounts of electricity from concentrating solar power in the coming decades from the Sahara. And I think we need other North Sea grid and other projects like that. Important, all these three prongs should reinforce each other. If we start the private sector initiative, we go to coalitions of governments and say, let us move forward with the enabling environment, and then in turn feed this eventually into the UN framework.
Now you mentioned the Desertec project, and you also mentioned a bit about grid. I mean, how much do you think smart grid technologies can contribute to a low carbon future?
Enormously, enormously. And in fact, I think projects like Desertec and others should really stimulate now the European Union to think about the super grid, about smart grids, and push this from the private sector. I see tremendous potential. In the European Climate Foundation, I'm on the board, we are thinking exactly about that, and we're designing a roadmap for energy for 2050 for the European Commission, where this plays prominently.
Then you mentioned also the CDM needs to be scaled up. There's a big problem with the CDM in that without a UN treaty, the only demand is going to come from the European Union, the EU ETS. What do we need to see for the CDM to be scaled up? Negotiators are already saying that we're unlikely to get a treaty this year even.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that there will be sufficient momentum to fill the CDM with life, even in its regional markets that emerge. But my point is a different one. By now redesigning, reforming, streamlining, equipping the CDM executive board, the designated operational entities with more capacity, more funding, we send a very strong message that the system is ready to go. But you are right, obviously at this moment we don't have the substance to feed it.
And going again to the lack of a treaty, we don't have a treaty, we're probably not going to get one this year. How does that hamper the development of renewables?
Well, I think the renewables story is gaining momentum independently now. I see with many clients from China to California to India now, a real good renewables paradigm shift happening. And what I mentioned as a feed-in tariff regime, where you, for renewables, in South Africa, for example, one proposal is South Africa, UK and Germany to work on such a feed-in tariff regime for renewables in South Africa. Technical assistance, co-financing, the feed-in tariffs, institutional framework. I mean, the renewable sector has quite some momentum now, I believe.
And is that one of the sectors that the finance that you were talking about, the 100 billion a year, could pour into, developing schemes like this in South Africa and other countries?
Absolutely. The 100 billion will have to go for adaptation and mitigation. It will have to come, in my book, in large part from the private sector, by public-private partnerships, leveraging up public sector guarantees or monies 1, 5 times, 7 times, 10 times. And a lot of this would also go into renewables.
Looking again at the renewable sector, do you see IPOs and M&A activity rising this year?
Hard to say, but yeah, I think there is momentum.